In today's video, I'll be sharing the 22 tips to stay organized inside of clay.com, and these are the exact 22 things that I do on a daily basis in order to stay sane whilst building over 3 or 4 clay tables pretty much every single day for myself and for my clients over B2B Boosted, which the agency that I run. So essentially, I'm just going to jump straight in and I'll walk you through one by one every single bit of advice that I have for you. The first advice is something that I don't see too many people doing, and that's labeling the inputs, the steps, and the outputs very clearly. So if we go into a random clay table, this is a template example of like whenever we launch a campaign for the followers of competitors, which is a very common campaign that we launch right now. We templated this so that we labeled the input columns. So we know that in order for this campaign to run, we need the full name, we need the first name, last name, job title, and location of the person. And if those inputs are present, we know the rest of the clay table will take care of itself. So the rest of it will run. So that's the first thing I can't stress enough. Just click on rename column and label those to perfection, because in my opinion, it just makes it so unscalable if you don't take care of actually labeling the inputs. So that's the first thing. The second thing, apart from the inputs, we also label the steps. So if it's a qualification step, we always just call it like check 1, check 2, check 3, that kind of thing. And then also if it's just a basic enrichment, like enriching a company using a LinkedIn profile, we just say step 2, enrich company. Once again, the reason that we put it in that step order is because it's a lot easier to troubleshoot and debug later down the line. If we have a challenge or something of that sort, whenever we contact like Clay customer support in the top right corner here, we can just say, hey, step 3 in table 1 is not working. And then they understand what we're talking about. And then it's just super simple. So that's the first thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind as well, whenever we have all of this sorted, we also label the outputs. So the outputs could be, for instance, adding a lead to a campaign or generating a personalized email or something of that sort. So those are the 3 things that we cover to start with. So it's just labeling the inputs, the steps, and the outputs very clearly. The second thing is color coding the input, steps, and outputs. I wouldn't talk about this too much, but the main gist of it is typically the inputs go in green for us. If we need to tweak it, we may mark this in yellow. And the reason we would change the color to yellow would be because we know that before we run this entire table, we need to tweak this prompt so that it basically, is applied for this specific client or this specific use case. And that's one thing that we find really useful as well. So that's another thing that's really cool. And then we'll talk about color coding later on as well in a bit more detail. And the other thing that we do is create and use folders to organize our work. Once again, super self-explanatory, but we do have separate folders. So for instance, we have SOP templates. Here we have a bunch of different templates that we have in-house for ourselves. And then on top of that, we have like a clients folder. We have in progress tables, SOP templates, and then temporary tables. And then the rest should be clean. These are just 2 other videos that I'm shooting today. So go check them out, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. But essentially this has to be clean. Otherwise what you end up with is a lot of untitled workbooks and it becomes an absolute mess. And you don't want to, hang out inside of Clay if it's just such a mess, right? So the other bit of advice, we talked about folders. We talked about removing untitled workbooks. So any sort of tables that you haven't finished or you just used to practice, just delete them all together. And then the other thing to keep in mind is this. So hopefully you can see my screen now. A lot of people forget about where Clay actually fits in with all of your other work. Clay is the middleman. It's the bridge between the inputs and the outputs. And I say this on a daily basis because it's just crazy the amount of people that I see entering Clay, playing around with like 20 different enrichments, trying to make up like a crazy AI-driven flow because they're just, trying to overcomplicate things for themselves. But before you enter Clay, promise me this thing. First of all, you know what the inputs are in order for your Clay table to work. So what is the data that you're bringing into Clay already? Is it the verified email addresses? Is it the full names? Is it the LinkedIn profiles? You need to be 100% confident in what inputs you need before building out a Clay table. So ask yourself, what are the inputs? Do I have all the inputs? Where do I go and get them? Typically, you'll be like your email finder, sales navigator, your CRM, like job data, whatever it can be. You need to go and source that data first. Only after that can you ask yourself, what can Clay do with this? So then Clay can help you research, qualify, enrich, personalize, like whatever it is. Like Clay will help you do all of this fun stuff. And then finally, your question should be, what's the output? Is it a LinkedIn message? Is it an email? Is it a reminder? Is it a task set in the CRM? Like what is going on here? And the reason that I'm saying this is because I want you to be 100% clear on what are the inputs that you're feeding into Clay, what are the steps that Clay has to do, and what are the outputs. Before you can answer those 3 questions, don't bother starting a Clay table, because that's the kind of times when inside of Unlock Clay, which is the course that I run, a lot of students message me and they're like, hey, I forgot to do this and now I'm stuck. And tough, because this is not the order in which you need to be going through. And of course, I try to help as much as possible, but it just really frustrates me because a lot of the time people just jump ahead of themselves with this, but it's very much avoidable if you just clarify the inputs. So that's that. Next up, let's talk about deduplication, because deduplication is really important. So let me just show you for a second. There is this magic button in the bottom right-hand corner. And if you click on this button, you can enable automatic deduplication. And let's say we do it on the full name. This will mean that we can never have two duplicate contacts. So if I show you over here now, let's say we do Tim and we do Tim again here, one of them will auto delete. So in theory, yep, you could see that in the background it just vanishes. That's because deduplication is enabled. That means that you could never have duplicate rows of data. So you wouldn't spend clay credits basically you don't spend an enrichment on running the contact twice because they're in two separate rows. Then for instance, let's say if the first name here is Tim and the first name here is Tim as well, but this column is not deduplicated, you can always click on the column and click on dedupe here and then delete the duplicate row. So that's another way that I always recommend for you to deduplicate data, but always make sure that at the bottom here, you enable automatic deduplication based on the full name or based on the LinkedIn profile. So that's another thing that's really, really important for you to not be wasting too many clay credits. Next up, we're going to talk about switching table off when importing large data sets. So essentially in this case, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, you will see this button which says auto update columns is enabled for this table. If you click on that, you can turn off table. And this will mean that, let's say you import data here, it wouldn't just start running and burning through clay credits for you. So make sure whenever you are testing data and you're importing more data, just make sure that you turn off the table. Super important as well. Another thing to keep in mind is, let's say we have like let's say we imported a profile or something. Instead of running all the rows straight away, you can just click on edit column, save and don't run, and then just click play on one of the rows. So just click play on one row. If it works on one row, play on two rows. If it works on two rows, then just run for the whole table. But don't run all the rows straight away. So just click on the play button for one of the rows with enrichment and just don't run it for any more than that. And the other thing to keep in mind is you can also switch off auto update when working on complex tables. So for instance, when we talk about auto update, let's say if step 2 over here runs, fine, then it will then start running step 3. But if step 3 runs automatically after step 2, it will take clay credits from both enrichments, right? So if we want to stop that, we can just click on auto update here at the bottom of the enrichment and switch it off. And this way, we will basically, like if this is switched on, it will automatically run the next enrichment on the right of it. But if not, it just wouldn't trigger the running of the next one afterwards. This is another thing to keep in mind. So make sure that you switch off auto updates if you don't want to be burning through too many clay credits. Next up, focus on one table at a time for better organization. I find that especially in the agency world. Obviously, I run an agency called B2B Boosted. Go check it out if you want clay implemented for your business. But essentially, a big challenge, especially in the agency world or for anyone with this like shiny object syndrome, a lot of the time you want to be building 2 or 3 clay tables at the same time. But the reality is you just need to focus on one thing from start to finish. Otherwise, you'll just end up almost being done another clay table. And the chances are it will just take way longer than if you just basically just start with one, finish one clay table, move on to the next one. So just go from start to finish on one clay table before moving on to the next one. I think I repeated myself quite a few times there, so hopefully you understood that one. Next up, save other people's templates separately. One thing I can't stress enough is a lot of the time, like we give away these random templates that we have in-house. So for instance, we have like this really cool template where let's say we scrape brick and mortar businesses, for example, right? A lot of the time people will share this template with you. And let's say this is the template that they will share with you. You would usually save it into your own workspace over here. And a lot of the time, people start trying to use the entire template for themselves. But in reality, 99% of the time, I would not actually use the entire template from end to end because every single time someone shares a template, it's adapted to their tech stack. So for example, they may use Instantly as their email automation tool, but you use Smartly, or they may use Prospio as their email finder, but you use like ICPs or whatever it is. There are too many differences in the ways that, in the tools that other people use and what you use. So I recommend just using a template as pure inspiration to like copy the prompts or look at the enrichments that they use, but don't use the entire template because that's when you get really, really lost. And that's why I recommend just saving other people's templates separately. So just save it as a template and then reference it and check it out. So save it like in another folder, which is like other people's templates, right? That's that. Next up, never build on top of other people's tables. Use it as inspiration only. We talked about this already. Save your own templates for reuse. So for instance, if we click on add enrichment, and let's just imagine for a second that you generate a prompt using ChatGPT, you can always click on save template in the top right-hand corner so that you can reference it later on. So always, whenever you use prompts, just save it as a template so that you can reference it later on. And then also, if you want to then browse the templates, you can then go into this enrichment, click on browse templates, and you will see over here, like for instance, we have like a prompt for following up with events attendees, or we have time zone finder, or business model, and that kind of stuff. So it's all of these prompts that took us forever to create, and for that reason, we save them inside of our workspace. So make sure you do that as well. On top of that, build a waterfall template for systematic processing. Obviously, this AI generated, I think, the systematic processing bit, but it is super, super important. If we click on add enrichment, to just type in work email, and then you would see all of these work email waterfalls. I would recommend just setting this up yourself with whatever tools you want to use, whatever inputs you want to use, and then you can just click on save as template. And then next time you don't need to configure it completely from scratch every single time. So that will save you a lot of time. On top of that, use Clay functions to maximize efficiency. If I'm totally honest with you, I've just done a video on Clay functions, so go check it out on the channel. But essentially, Clay functions will save you so much time that it will basically mean that you don't need to be building enrichment by enrichment your Clay tables. So I'll make sure to link the Clay functions video underneath this video, so you could go in the link in the description down below, and hopefully I'll have that linked over there. So go check out the Clay functions video. Another thing to keep in mind is I very much recommend whenever you're doing any sort of outreach from Clay, you have a DNC, so a do not contact list. So in that case, the way they will work is basically you will add a new table. So you will click on add blank table, and you can basically import, obviously, all of these businesses if you just click on actions or import from CSV, and you can import a bunch of businesses here. And then whenever you're doing outreach in another table, so let's say if you're doing outreach here in you can then just do a lookup, and it will be lookup multiple rows, I believe. And then you can just look up and make sure that the name of that company or the domain of that company is not the same as the one on the list of leads that you're enrolling in outreach now. So that way you basically cross-reference your do not contact list so that you avoid reaching out to people that you've already contacted before or who you don't want to contact. So that's how you would use a do not contact list. I've got separate videos on how to use lookup multiple rows in another table. If not, just comment down below and I'll create a video. It's literally like a 2-second thing. The other thing to keep in mind is whenever you do outreach, especially once again, depending on if you're doing it for yourself or if you're in an agency space, regardless, you don't want to be paying for the same data twice, right? So you don't want to be paying Apollo once today and once for another credit, like in a month's time. So what I recommend is whenever you reach out to a person once and whenever you add them to a campaign, so when you do add lead to campaign, for example, after you add them to a campaign, you can also just create a separate table. So let's say we create this custom table here, and then you also write them to this other table and write to other table, select the table, and this could be like your CRM table. So basically you push all of the details about that person into like a CRM table inside of Clay. And that way, in case you always have a list of people that you previously contacted all in one nice CRM so that you can recontact them later on. And you don't need to like dig them up from old Clay tables. They will all be saved inside of one CRM. So that way is after you run all your enrichments and you push them into your campaign, after that, just click on add enrichment, write to other, and then just create a table and send data to that table with all of those contacts. I hope that makes sense. And then next up, define clear scope, step enrichment prompt for each action. Show you how that's done as well. One example I like to use for this is the typical use case for Clay is probably to write a super personalized outreach message. So let's imagine this is the outreach message. So you have like, hi, first name, I just added this random item from their website into my cart, noticed your opt-in pop-up captures just the email and not the phone number, blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. Like it's relatively personalized because it has all of these random custom variables, those like brackets over here. And those are all personalized to the individual that we're reaching out to. The main process inside of Clay up to this point has always been thinking of what that super personalized email looks like, breaking it down into custom variables, and identifying the enrichment for each one of those variables. So for instance, in this case, step one will be to find the best-selling item from the website. We'll get it. Then after you identify the dynamic variable, you need to identify what enrichment you would use and then what prompt you would use. So very much the same concept now. I would very much encourage you, if you are a newbie to Clay, always write down the exact steps that you want to happen to the data. So if we remember over here that Clay is just the middleman, right? Write down step by step what you want to be done inside of Clay, and then write it down as like step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5. And then where you would get it from, write down the exact enrichment, and then write down the prompt. So at the very least, when you're getting started with Clay, just write down the steps, the dynamic variables, and the prompts, because I guarantee you it will save you a lot of time. And yeah, that should probably be quite good practice to get into. Prompting and quality control. So once again, a lot of the time, most Clay newbies struggle with basically how to use ChatGPT or Clayagent. And for those of you that may be new to this, whenever you type in ChatGPT inside of Clay and you click on generate text, you would see that now they have this mega prompter, I think it's called, whereby you just need to give it like some conversational prompt, and then it will basically just make this prompt a lot better for you. It will generate a better prompt, and then it will help you run this like AI prompts across a bunch of different contacts. So in this case, I would recommend always following this 6-step process. I've got a separate video on how to speak to AI on this channel as well. So subscribe if you watch this far, because yeah, you're probably like 0.01% of the people that make it like, I don't know, 15 minutes into a video. And essentially, these are the 6 steps that I recommend that you take whenever you prompt AI. So the first thing is you have to say, hey, here is the input is this cool thing. So for example, hey, the input is the LinkedIn profile of a person. The second thing is define what the action is. So you would say, based on the input, I want you to go and visit the person's LinkedIn profile and their website, for example. After that, you need to constrain the output. So you would say like, hey, keep this output short, under 12 words, no quotation marks, no capitalized start. And then afterwards, if you want to put that output into a sentence, so for example, you want to get Clayagent to find the past company of where this person worked and reference it in an outreach message, you would give an example. And then in this case, you would need to provide it with a prefix. So, hey, the prefix is, I saw you used to work at company name, and then the company name will be filled in. And then finally, you would need to give it an example on top of that. I know this is somewhat confusing. I've got a separate video, which like in 15 minutes will explain this to you much, much better. But this is one thing I can't stress enough. Just make sure you tell it what the input is, what you want Clay to do, what you want AI to do on the basis of that input, constrain the output, tell it what not to do, give it a prefix. So just say like, hey, the output should follow this sentence format or whatever, and then give it an example. If you do that, you'll be better than 99% of users. And then after that, all you would need to do is click on generate, and it will generate a pretty good prompt for you. So moving on, I believe this is number 20 now. So prompt correctly using the 6-step framework, which I've just shared there. So yeah, that should be quite self-explanatory. And then one other thing, which is super, super important, marking columns in red if something is bugging or something is wrong. Because a lot of the time, you will be switching from different tools. So the easiest way to visualize this for you, that something is completely off, is just by clicking on the column, change color, red. And then next time when you enter the Clay table, it's just a nice mental shortcut that hey, it's this column because it's marked red, right? Like it stands out to you. And then that's pretty much that. I think the last thing to keep in mind as well, so now Clay also introduced to you their new credit consumption feature as well. Inside of your Clay account, if you head over to settings by clicking on your name in the top right corner, you should be able to see the credits usage section. And over here, you would see every single table that you've been spending Clay credits on. And in this case, you could basically just understand within each table, what are you actually spending your Clay credits on? So let's say in this case, Clayagent Navigator, it will tell you the exact table where you're spending this Clay credits, and you can click onto this Clay table to understand what your credit consumption is based out of. And based on that, you can then go and download my Save Clay Credits guide, which I'll link underneath this video as well for your benefit. And it will teach you how to save over $700 at least every single month inside of Clay, because it's a lot cheaper to go and buy these tools outside of Clay directly rather than basically spending 3 cents per credit inside of Clay right now. So that's basically that. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to like it. Make sure to subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment if you made it this far as well. But essentially, let me know if I missed any other tips for staying organized. I'll be very, very grateful if you include those. But other than that, if you enjoyed this, you might absolutely love Unlock Clay. I don't mention it enough. It's got over 450 students right now inside of Unlock Clay. It's the biggest course, as far as I know, for anyone that's trying to learn Clay completely from scratch. It's definitely the cheapest one. It just costs £100. You will become insanely proficient at Clay super, super fast. You get fancy certificates, and you get a community that will be behind you should you have any questions throughout the course completion. So if you want to take me up on that, go join Unlock Clay. Go check out the website. It will be linked down below. Other than that, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.